Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Indie Film Academy podcast. Today we are talking with Jerrol Lebraron from InkTip.
Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast, where it's all about learning how to make and market your independent film online. And now your host, Jason Buff.
Okay, sure. Well, InkTip is basically, you could say, a directory for screenwriters. In other words, it's kind of like a Yellow Pages. Producers are looking for a particular type of writer or script, and they go to InkTip, and they're able to search from any of hundreds of different criteria to find the exact type of writer or script that they're looking for. So what a writer does is they list a script on InkTip, and they fill out a bunch of check boxes about the elements of the screenplay, the genre, the lead characters, what other sub-elements, is espionage involved, or is there lots of action, or is there no action? And so they fill that all out, and then producers register for access to InkTip with us, and we check the credits, we check the references, and if it looks like there's somebody that if we had a script, would send them our script, then we give them access to InkTip. And as a result, we have somewhere between 3 and 8 scripts sold or optioned or writers hired or obtaining representation every single week. So it's almost one a day.
Wow.
And last year we had...
You said 30?
Say that again?
You said 30 or 3?
3 to 8 a week, almost one every single day. And then last year we had 38 movies that were made from writers of scripts found through InkTip. So that's 38. Wow. That's almost one a week.
Okay.
And this week we're doing pretty similar. I think we're at about 30. I think by the time the year is out, we'll be somewhere around, I'm guessing, 33 to 35 movies made from writers of scripts found through InkTip.
How do you track that? Do you keep in touch with people after they've used the service? Yeah. And then they also, we do mention it in our newsletter, and of course producers want to get extra publicity for their screenplay or for their movies, and writers want to get extra publicity, for having just sold or optioned their script or gotten hired, and we, of course, we're really transparent about that. If someone is found through us, we're going to let people know about it. And that way, you can do your own due diligence. Well, how many writers of scripts are actually getting sold from them being found on InkTip? Well, you just go to our successes page, and it lists them there. So we don't make claims that we don't then back up. So, yeah. So how would you say that, I know there's other similar services out there, what would you say makes InkTip unique from those?
Results.
Okay.
I mean, we get 3 to 8 sold or optioned or writers hired every single week. 3 to 8. Nobody does that. Nobody even does remotely close. We get 30 movies made a year. There's not a site out there that gets even one made a year. So it's results.
Right.
That's
What accounts for that success? I mean, what are you guys doing that specifically is better than? I mean, how are you attracting producers and people that are actually making things happen?
Well, it would be something that I would be. If I don't feel this is the right venue to answer that particular question, because I don't particularly want the competition.
Well, that's probably true. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but we do get those results, and we do it week in and week out, and it doesn't matter if it's during December, it doesn't matter if it's during January or October, we still get that average.
Right.
And we've been around since Valentine's of 2000, and it's just, consistent.
Now, are there any success stories that you had early on when you were first kind of starting the idea and testing it and getting your system working? Was there anything that, like one success story of a film being made that comes to mind, or anything that you remember?
Not really. it's kind of a no, not really. It's just because I do have one mentality that's a little bit different than others, and that is that if a person is fresh out of film school, let's say they graduated from USC or wherever, and they've made 5 or 6 shorts, and now they've got several very reputable producers backing them and saying, "Hey, if he finds a project and I like it, I'll produce it." We will give those guys access. And just back to what you're saying is the principle is that I don't care if the person is someone who can only produce movies on $500,000 or someone who can produce something on $100 million. We're going to treat them the same. If they're looking for writers and scripts, we're going to help them find it. And that's not terribly proprietary. That's just our mentality on it. We're not going to play favorites.
Right. And how did you have to develop your criteria for what was in the list? Like, for example, if a producer comes and he's looking for a very specific kind of script, is that something that has evolved over time?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. It used to be, I think when I first started, there were maybe, 30 to 50 different ways the producer could, or 30 to 50 different options the producer could choose to find the type of writer script that they're looking for. Now they could do keyword searches, and they can, select from, like I said, about 250 different options. So it could be, is there some kind of ethnicity to the movie? Are there social issues that they're trying to bring up, that the writer's trying to bring up? There's lots of different choices now. So yeah, at the very beginning, when I first started and I had 0 resources, I did the minimum that I could do, and as the years have gone by, we just refined it more and more and more.
Right. Okay. And are there different levels of service, or is it just kind of one size fits all?
In terms of the producers, it's one size fits all, meaning that if we feel they're qualified, if we would give them one of our scripts, then we'll give them access to InkTip, and we'll help them just as though they were, a Michael Bay. So it's definitely one size fits all in that regard. We don't play favorites. Right. If they're looking, we're going to help them. In terms of writers, there are several services. One of them is listing a script on the site. And that, by far, in my opinion, is the most effective way to do it. Then you do have some writers who have 12 or 15 completed screenplays. And to list that many screenplays on the site would be quite expensive. So what they'll do is they'll just list a couple of scripts on the site, and then they'll subscribe to our preferred newsletter, which is basically a newsletter that we send off to writers where we provide them with anywhere from 6 to 8 or even 10 leads every single week about producers and what they're looking for right now and how to submit to them. And then the last thing that we offer is they can list in our magazine, meaning if they have a script on the site, then they can include the log line for the script in our magazine, and we snail mail it to about 4,000 industry professionals in Canada and the continental United States. And then we also email it to about somewhere, I forget what the number is, it's at least 10,000, might be 20,000 producers as well, to get the writer as much exposure as possible for their log line. So those are the basic 3 services. And we have other free services that are pretty cool. For example, you can if you don't, most writers have quite a bit of difficulty in writing a log line, and I can understand that. You spend all this time writing the script, and it's now 90 or 100 pages long, and now you've got to sum it all up into one or 2 coherent, grammatically correct sentences. So we developed a system, and this is something that nobody else has. And basically what it does is it divides the log line, and it divides it into the three elements of any industry standard log line. And then once a person has entered those three things, it allows you to massage that towards actually a coherent one or two sentence log line. It's really cool. And anyone who wants access, they just register at InkTip.com. They don't have to pay for anything, but since their log lines are saved and they're able to edit and go back in and make new ones, etc., they'll need to register to have a username and password. So those are some of the different services that we offer.
Now, talking about log lines, do you have any specific advice for people who are writing their log lines other than, using this system, obviously, but what do you think makes a good log line?
You know, it's an interesting thing because there's some variables to this. For example, you take a producer who is going, hey, I need a thriller, an action thriller that I can produce for $2 million. That's what I need. I've got distributors in place. I've got the financing. That's what I need. Well, when they search on the site, what they're looking for is a log line that communicates that that's what it is, so to speak. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, I've seen log lines that I thought were not very good at all, but they were industry standard. They had a basic character description, they had the character's need or goal, and they had the basic premise or obstacle the character had to overcome. They were that would be specifically for a character-driven, not for a story-driven. They had those elements. It wasn't incredibly spicy, but it had those three. So the producer goes, "That's what I'm looking for. Let me read it," and then he ends up, buying the screenplay and making a movie out of it. That's pretty common. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not so important how quote-unquote spicy you make it. It's a matter of making sure that it has those three basic elements so that when a producer is looking for what you have, they're able to recognize it. And that's why you do an industry standard log line. Now, you can, once you have those basic elements in place, you can then spice it up. But it's got to be industry standard. You can't just go, what happens to a dinosaur when, its mom leaves? And some writers think that's a log line. It's not. And you're not going to get the same kind of traction as if it's industry standard. So that's why we developed it. And we developed it after literally thousands of interviews with producers and trying to figure what the basic elements are. And we've tested it and helped writers rewrite theirs based on our formulas, and we actually found there were two basic ones. One is for a character-driven, one is for story-driven, and the elements are slightly different, and you just plug in the basic lines there, and then you can do a log line in literally minutes, and it's actually decent. Then you can spruce it up from there.
So when these producers are looking for films, screenplays, do you find that there are any kind of red flags that go up for them when they start reading a log line or even a screenplay? Are there any things that just turn them off that screenwriters can avoid?
Yeah. Typos and grammatical errors are the first thing. You just shouldn't have them, and the reason for that is really, really simple. Because a lot of writers think, well, okay, so if there's an error here or there, it's not that big a deal. But it actually is, because there are so many writers out there that will put out screenplay or logline or synopsis without typos and grammatical errors. So when you have those in there, you're instantly letting every producer know that you're not going to be a professional. So that's the first thing right off the bat. Typos and errors. Just get rid of them. Don't have any in there, and that'll be a step in the right direction. Understand how a logline is supposed to be written. Understand how a synopsis is supposed to be written. And then the other thing is, don't get too anxious. And this I would caution for every screenwriter. It's a never-ending source of upset that writers will send out emails, send out various queries, make calls, send out faxes, and get very, very few responses back. And the reason for that is that, you know, imagine yourself, you're a development exec and you're new in the business, but you've been trained, you know how you're supposed to do your job, and you get queries and you answer the queries and you let the writer know and you say, sorry, this is not for me. And then that writer goes on a tirade and gives you hell. You're going to be less inclined to answer the next email from the next writer. So what happens is a few writers that are really anxious or maybe really shouldn't be writers because they're too temperamental, they ruin it for the rest of the writers. But this is why query letters and log lines, etc., are not answered to a large degree. It's just because these producers have received so many irate communications after passing on something that they just don't want to read another one. Excuse me one second. So that would be, so the writer needs to temper themselves and know that it's not necessarily they're not necessarily being intentionally ignored. And they should also know that for every query letter that they've sent out and not received a response to, producers send out 5 times that many and never get a response to. So it just goes all the way up and down the food chain. That's just the way the business is. So don't be offended by it.
Now, when writers are trying to connect with producers, as you mentioned, are there ever situations where you have, for example, a really good screenplay, but it's just, for whatever reason, not meeting the right criteria and they're not getting, hits from it? Is there any way for a writer to kind of do the opposite and get in touch with producers, or is there some way they can network?
Well, I'll tell you, here's typically the way it happens. Let's say that a producer finds a script on InkTip and they read it and then they go, wow, this script is just for budgetary or for lead character, because they could have a particular actor they have in mind that they're working with, that they want to get a movie for, a screenplay for. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, they go, no, this is not for me, but I really love this guy's writing. Well, I can tell you that producers can contact him or her and say, I loved your writing. This screenplay is not for me. Do you have anything else? That's pretty common. In fact, probably, I would say 20% of the movies that are made from writers and scripts who are found through InkTip are actually as a result of exactly that. This script wasn't for me. Loved your writing. I've got a screenplay that I've been working on. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to jump on board and help me write it so that I can get it made. Or do you have anything else? I'd like to check that out so that maybe I can make that. It's about 20%. That's a pretty high percentage. So yes, I find that to be a very, very common kind of thing. And the only thing the writer should do is, just be courteous. If the producer does email, then don't send them 20 emails in a day. Answer the producer's email. Don't make it 3 pages long. It should be, just a couple short paragraphs. And just stay in touch once every 6 weeks or so, and let them know what you're up to. That's the way to generate relationships.
Now, is there a pretty is it kind of all over the map, or is it fairly the budgets of the movies that are being produced, are they kind of in the same range, or are they kind of all over the place? Or do you know?
Let's see. Well, we've got a trilogy right now where one of the producers attached is Tom DeSantos from X-Men and some other huge movies, and he's on board to produce it. He found it, and one of the other producers found it through InkTip. So it runs the gambit. At the same time, the majority of the films are in the independent range. They're anywhere from, say, let's say, $500,000 to $3 million somewhere or $5 million. I'm not involved in the producing process, and so I don't know exactly what the budgets are. But I'm imagining that's about what they are. Some are done for as low as $100,000, some are done for $10 million. But I would say probably the average is somewhere between $500,000 and $3 million.
Okay. And what is the process for determining if producers are, legit, or what do you get? What's kind of the vetting process for them?
We check the credits and we check their references, and it's just as simple as that. And then part of it is just gut feeling. I'll give you an example. A gentleman, Brooklyn Weaver, he runs Energy Entertainment, and he had just gotten out of college and had been working as an assistant over at Endeavor when there was an Endeavor. And he approached me and he says, I'm opening up my own shingle and I'd like to access to InkTip. And I was reluctant. I said, no, I don't think so. You're not an agent. I mean, it'd be one thing if you were an agent and you'd been doing it for a while and now you wanted to produce, we'd give you access in a heartbeat, but you don't really have any, credentials. And so basically we went back and forth and he invited me out to lunch and we met and I looked at him and I went, I see the potential there. This guy doesn't have any credits, but I see the potential. And he ended up getting a six-figure sale for at least one of our writers. John Sullivan got $275,000 for a movie that was sold to Columbia TriStar. So a lot of it is just a judgment call and your gut feeling, and that's one of the reasons why we always require references, is because we want to know what other people think about that person. And sometimes a person can have plenty of credits, but it turns out that they've just been involved in scam after scam after scam, and that's what the references are for. And the references aren't just, my grandmother, they're other producer references, other people in the industry who say, this guy's a pretty good guy. I think that if he found the right script, he could either get it made or get it into the right hands to get it made. So the vetting process is extremely subjective, and we want people with potential there, and it's sometimes we get it wrong, but most of the time we get it right, or we wouldn't be getting 30 movies made in a year.
Now, when you say that this guy was a producer and he sold it to another company, is there a lot of that going on, that a producer is, trying to get a screenplay and kind of build a project, and then they want to take that project to a larger company and kind of build the deal? I mean, how does that kind of work?
I am really glad you asked me that question. Nobody has ever asked me that before. And it is really, really important, because what happens is writers will see some wannabe producer who is only done documentaries, for example. Let's just take that as an example. That producer's only done documentaries, but the people that he's had in his documentaries are named talent. They're Billy Bob Thornton and Morgan Freeman and that kind of thing. But he's only done documentaries, and the budget's for probably $100,000 or so, in that range. And what writers don't seem to understand is that any director or producer who has had an actor on their documentary has access to that actor even years later. I mean, I produced a simple little documentary, and I can email any one of those people involved in it, and they reply within that day, even though it's been 3 years since I've done anything. You understand what I'm saying? So that this is kind of digressing, but I thought I'd just throw that out there. But the way the industry works is, let's say that you want to be a producer, you want to be the next. The next Michael Bay or Jerry Bruckheimer or whomever. Well, they all started somewhere, and where they started was they found a great script, And in all likelihood, they didn't even get producing credit. In all likelihood, they found a great script, they brought it to a friend of theirs, and their friend said, okay, we're going to produce this movie, you're not going to get any credit, but you're going to get some experience. And that happens all the time. But in other cases, if you take a look at any movie that's made nowadays, even if it's a TV movie, there's typically anywhere from 6 to 15 different producers, consulting producers, creative producers, associate producers, executive producers, co-producers, etc. All of those producers brought some element to that movie, and a lot of the time that element was the script. They found the script. They went to a contact of theirs. They've never produced a movie, and now they've got co-producer credit because they actually brought some of the elements in play, which was the key element, the script. So if you look at any movie, you're going to see all these credits. That's what a lot of those are. Or one producer can bring a named actor on board, and he's got that relationship solid, so they're going to let him jump on board. That's how movies are made. It's a collaboration. So when you see a producer that has produced 5 movies, and all 5 movies only cost, $500,000 a piece to make, you look there and you start looking at all the other producers attached, and then you go, oh, he actually could get his script to so-and-so because he's got a connection with so-and-so who knows this guy personally. So that's more how beginning writers, to a large degree, beginning writers get their name known there. I mean, we've had this happen so many times where one producer says, this is a great screenplay, it's not for me, but I've got a friend of mine who's a producer, and this is what he's looking for. I'm going to put you in touch with him. Or you have a situation where a producer is, they're producing very small budget indie films that are $1 million or less, and they love that writer, but in order to get any movie made, that producer has to get that script into about, anywhere from 10 to 100 other hands. So that writer's screenplay is going to, a dozen or 24 name actors' hands. It's going into distributors' hands. It's going into other producers' hands. It's going into directors' hands. So it's not something to be taken lightly. Even if a small producer looks at it, man, you've just gotten a road in there, and that producer is going to get your script read by more other producers and name actors and so forth than the writer is going to be able to accomplish in a year, and they'll do it in a few weeks. So really good question. It's really important that writers understand how significant an option is, even if it's a dollar option. Even if it's a dollar option, the fact is that producer is now going to get a whole bunch of other people who might be able to make that movie, and so many more hands than the writer will ever be able to do in many, many months.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of overlap here between what a producer is doing for the writer and what, say, like a manager or an agent would be doing. I mean, is there
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, there's overlap.
So it sounds like a screenwriter should be looking more for a producer than they should be looking for an agent or a manager.
Well, I will tell you, it's easier to sell a Russian screenplay than it is to get an agent or a manager. That is a statistical fact. But if I were a writer and I were trying to get my movies made, I would be seeking out both.
Okay. But you don't need to have that InkTip, for what I see, it's more about going direct, right? You don't need to have agents or managers involved.
Oh, we have agents and managers involved, absolutely. We get about, I don't know, the range varies, but it could be, from 25 to 50 writers gain representation through InkTip every year. So it's almost one a week. Or let's say it's one every other week. But it's in that range. So, yeah, we definitely have writers gaining representation through InkTip.
No, what I meant was writers who are going to InkTip necessarily need it to go to it. They might get it from there, but the ones who are putting their screenplays there don't need to have representation.
That is correct.
Okay.
It's always nice to have representation, and when you can get it, by all means, take advantage of it. But one shouldn't wait or make that their sole goal. What'll happen a lot of the time is that you'll get an option, you'll get another option, you get another option, or sell, and then you'll get a movie made, and then you'll find that more agents and managers are interested in you because now you've already done the work to where they can now take you to the next level. It's kind of like the way the actors, that whole side of the business works. If you're an actor and you obtain representation, right, but you don't do anything, and you just rely solely on the agent or the manager. Well, that agent or manager, if they really believe in you, they're going to push you. But if that agent also has another actor who fits the basic same profile, say it's a male teen or whatever, or say male young adult, and this actor is constantly doing his own homework. He's going to networking parties, and he's, looking through the various publications about casting calls. And he's going to casting calls, and he's sending off his headshot to various production companies and so forth. And he's actually doing auditions, and he's actually getting work, albeit small work. Which actor is that agent going to be pushing more? The agent is going to be pushing the actor who's hustling. And it's the same way with writers. You get two writers with equal abilities, and the writer who's constantly sending out query letters and doing everything he can to assist his representative and constantly networking and so forth is going to be more heavily pushed than the writer who doesn't.
Now, for a screenwriter who's just getting started with that, what you just said in mind. Let's say I've just started writing a screenplay, and it's something that it's intended for a commercial purpose. I'm not just writing a passion project. I want to sell it at the end. Mm-hmm. What are the things that they can do from the very beginning to start, marketing themselves and to start networking and especially if they only have one screenplay so far?
Well, if they've got it, first thing they want to do is they want to make it polished. They need to make sure that screenplay is as good as they can possibly make it. That is an absolute must, and it's real simple to do that. You get you get on various writers groups and you study up and you go and do feedback back and forth and so on, and you take the feedback that seems to make sense to you, or that if you disagree that let's say three other people have given you the exact same feedback point, well, if three of them gave it to you, then it's probably a problem. So the first thing is perfect it. The next thing is to get familiar with the marketing aspects. Certainly you can post on InkTip, and I would encourage any writer who's got a complete screenplay that they've polished to do so, because obviously it works. But even without that, they can go to our website. They can go to InkTip.com, and there's a link that says there's a nav button at the top that says resources, and the very second item from that drop-down menu is articles. And in marketing and networking and pitching and all the various things that you can do to start getting your name out there so that you can get your movie made, that's in there. There are lots and lots of articles related to the business of writing. More specifically, the business of getting your movie made, as opposed to the technique and art of screenwriting. So those would be the three things. Make sure it's perfected. 2, list on InkTip, and definitely go to the InkTip website, go to the resources, and check out the articles.
Do you think writers should try to write screenplays that are based on leads they get, or by things they think are going to sell?
I think they should write art. I think they should write screenplays that they're passionate about, or if they just like to write and they want to write something that's marketable, then write something that's marketable in their eyes. By the time you find a going trend in the industry, let's say, as an example, Little Miss Sunshine came out and it was a huge hit, and then next thing you know, every producer in the Sun is looking for the next Little Miss Sunshine. Well, if you haven't already written the next Little Miss Sunshine, you've already missed the boat. So don't try and follow the trends that closely, because by the time you finish the screenplay, it'll be too late. Just write lots of screenplays so that when that trend then comes back around, that screenplay is there and ready.
Now, you said something in another interview that I wanted to discuss briefly, because it really was something that I have never heard. You had mentioned, a way to get your screenplay into the right hands, you'd mentioned something about unit production managers and getting it to people that were around the producers that you thought might be interested in screenplay.
Absolutely. Okay. A production manager, a unit production manager, a line producer, assistant directors, but mostly the unit production managers and line producers, they are in direct and constant communication with the actual producers. And if a script comes along to them that they like, they will pass on to the producers they've worked with because they want to become producers themselves. So there's so many different ways to get your name out there, and it's just a matter of really trying to figure that out. That's one avenue, is if you know a line producer, unit production manager, that there's a mixer coming up and you're going to be meeting with various ADs and crew and so forth, by all means go there, because there will be some there that are good friends with producers who are always production coordinators, for example, on every single project that producer does. Well, of course they're going to pitch that project if they like it. So one should definitely take advantage of it. Another is let's say that you do post. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you send off a query letter, or you post on InkTip, and you find a producer who read your screenplay and said, "Hey, I really liked it, but we've got something similar to that right now but I can't actually take your project on. I'm sorry to say, but I liked it." Well, all that writer has to do is just go to IMDb and look at the various producers that particular producer has produced with before, and the odds are those other people there may well be interested in your project, because obviously they produce the same kind of thing as the producer that just said they couldn't do anything with it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
roundabout. Are you following that? Okay, good. Yeah. So there are lots of different ways, and it's just a matter of just nurturing the relationships. One thing that writers should always understand is that, give you an example. You get two writers, both are, let's say that one is just a little more talented and skillful than another writer. But that other writer has been friends and been having open dialogue with this particular producer for many, many months now, and and they touch base every now and then, and there's a mixer and they see each other and they say hi and all that. And then we got this other writer who hasn't done any of that and doesn't do any of that because he just wants to, quote unquote, work on his art. Who's that producer going to hire to write his next screenplay? He's not going to hire the most talented, I'm sorry to say. He's just not going to do it. He's going to hire the writer that he knows, providing that the talent is fairly equal. Obviously, if the one writer is, head and shoulders, night and day better, then he'll go for that one. But if the talent is kind of equal, maybe not, he'll hire the person he knows, because it's a known quantity. and he's already had a relationship. He's already had dialogue with this person. The way it works is you find a screenplay, and let's say you love it. As a producer, you've got to please actors, directors, distributors, financiers. You've got a lot of people to please, other producers. And they've all got to be happy with that script in order for them to jump on board. And they're often going to give the original producer notes. And they're going to say, I need it to be such and such, or this or that. Or the producer himself, based upon all of this networking and financing obligations or financing requirements, he's already going to know that there's going to be certain elements that he cannot have in the script in order for him to sell to certain markets. So he's going to give, and this will happen to even the most perfect screenplay, the producer is going to give that writer notes. And now the producer is waiting for the reaction that he gets from the writer. If the writer doesn't say, yes, let me accommodate that, yes, I can do that, and I'm going to do that. And if the writer doesn't have the creative and artistic power and ability to take those notes and turn into something great, well, then the producer is going to move on. Because as the project gets closer and closer in production, there are going to be more and more edits based upon which actors, distributors, financiers, directors, and so forth jump on board. So that's why relationship is so important in this industry, because the last thing any producer wants is to give a writer notes and then have that writer say, my script is perfect as is, I'm not going to edit it. Well, what you've just told the producer is, producer, I like my script the way it is, and I don't care what your notes are, and I don't care who you have to please, or what your financial requirements are, or what your actors think. This is the way the script is going to be. You've just basically told the producer he's never going to get that movie made. So he's going to move on. That's why it's important to start establishing relationships and getting the producers comfortable with the fact that you will actually work as a team and in a collaboration to make the script the way it needs to be made in order for the producer to actually get the money to produce the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like the key goal of networking is A, to prove that you have talent, but B, also to prove that you're not a jerk.
Exactly. Or jerk may not even be the right word. It may just be prima donna or just I mean, a newbie, a writer who hasn't had a movie made, they don't necessarily have to be jerks. They just may not understand what the producer has to go through to get a movie made, and so they don't understand that. Yes, you might have a brilliant, perfect piece of work, but still, there's an element or two that needs to be changed in order to actually get it made. And so the writer has to understand that and not be artistically offended, but actually go, okay, let me jump on board and let me make this the way you need it to get it made. So they could be jerked, it could be prima donna, or it could be just not understanding the industry well enough.
Right. So what's the typical process if a producer decides that they want to contract a writer? I mean, are they typically optioning screenplays?
Most producers, whether they deal in budgets of $200 million or they deal in budgets of $200,000, most producers option screenplay. Mm-hmm. And they hold on to it for 6 months to a year or whatever, and they do their darndest to get that doggone thing made. And if they can, then they relinquish their rights and then they move on. Meanwhile, that particular screenplay has just made its hands into a dozen or 2 dozen other producers. So good for the writer. So typically it's an option. So
that's a tool of a writer can use. Is they can, I know that an option is when a producer can basically say, I have the rights to if I want to buy this, I can buy it. But can writers after that keep shopping the screenplay around, saying that it's already optioned, but if it doesn't get picked up, that they would take it?
Well,
does it ever happen?
Well, they can take a very proactive view with it. And, one producer found it and optioned it, and they can say, hey, I'd like to see if I can help you get this movie made too. I mean, you found it because of the work that I was doing. Maybe I can help you find another producer who's interested, and you two can collaborate. They'd have to work that out with the producer, but a lot of producers will be completely open to that. And then the writer may actually be more than just a writer and may end up getting some kind of a associate or co-producer credit. So they can definitely do that. The other thing they can do is they can boast about that they're now an option screenwriter, that obviously they're, in order to get an option, there's got to be some quality and some artistic and art and skill involved in writing that screenplay. So that does help get other producers interested in their other works. They can also provide that screenplay as a writing sample. They've got to, once it's optioned, they do have to, get with the producer and find out what that producer will permit, because technically they have the rights to it. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
But a writer should always, once they get their first option, they should use that as a means by which they can then approach other producers for that script or for other screenplays, as well as approach agents and managers, letting them know that, hey, someone besides my mother likes my screenplay.
Well, okay, so are the majority of your writers, are they in Los Angeles?
They're all over the world.
Okay.
We've had movies made from writers in New Zealand and all over the world. It's not specific to any. It's China, it's Japan, it's Philippines, it's the African continent. It literally is all over the world. And I think, and I haven't personally gone and checked this, but I would be very, very surprised if after all this time that we haven't had scripts sold, option movies made from pretty much every continent, from writers from every continent. I'd be surprised if that hadn't occurred by now, because we've had over 250 movies made. Mm-hmm. So that'd be a surprise if that weren't the case.
And do you know what the process is for, say a producer options a screenplay, he's in Los Angeles and the writer is in, let's say, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Do they expect the writers to come fly out to Los Angeles to work on it, or do people just work through the internet now and it doesn't really matter?
They primarily work through the internet. Sometimes when they actually go into production, they'll ask the writer to be on set and be involved, and sometimes they won't. It really depends. Location is no longer as important as it was.
Right.
It is easier for people who live in Los Angeles. I will say that, or some major industry hub. It is easier for them, but it's not mandatory any longer. And if a producer does require a writer to be on set, then usually they pay the accommodations to make such occur.
Okay. But I guess the thing that I think a lot of people wonder is, they say I'm in I'm in Michigan, I'm in, Maine, wherever, or even I'm in the Philippines or whatever, and can I have a screenwriting career if I'm outside of Los Angeles? And what it sounds like you're saying is that it's really possible these days.
The answer is yes. It'll be easier in Los Angeles, but the answer is absolutely yes. We have writers who have had their movies made that are nowhere near L.A. and are in no way involved in the L.A. scene and never have been.
Okay. Now, what do screenwriters have to do? Do they do anything to protect themselves when they get on your service? Do they have to copyright their screenplays?
Yes, we do require that the writer either register with the Writers Guild or some other, or Copyright Office or some other recognized intellectual property protection agency. Somehow they've got to protect their work so that they can, so that they're protected. And then once they've provided us with the number for that particular agency, then they're allowed to list a script on the website. We don't want any writers who haven't protected their work. It's just
okay.
it's just too scary.
Now, there's a thing that you mentioned about tagging screenplays. When screenwriters are submitting their screenplays, that they have certain tags on them. Is that right?
Can you clarify that? I don't know what you mean by tags.
Well, that they would, when they're putting like the different categories that they fit into,
yes.
so the producers can find them. The thing that I was actually curious about is, do people, is there any sort of like tricks that people have developed to get their script? Like, I don't know, like Google has all these tricks that you use to make sure that people get to the right screenplays or to the right articles. I was just wondering if there were some tips for people who want to get their screenplay found that they can, like, put the right tags on it or whatever.
Yeah, well, a common mistake that writers make when they're placing a script on their site is that they don't select all of the various options that they should. Let me look up a couple, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. For example, let's say that most movies are, let's say you've got a thriller, right? Well, there are many thrillers that also have a romantic element, or let's say that there's you've got I guess you call it a dramedy. It's both equally a comedy and a drama, or it's equally a crime murder mystery and thriller, or it could be a thriller and a western. It could even be that. So writers are able to go in there and select the various elements that their screenplay belongs to. And if they don't actually do a thorough job of that, then they're not going to get the exposure that they want. For example, there's things like gore. Is there gore lots of, or gore none? You'll have some horror producers or thriller producers who are looking for a thriller or horror that doesn't have lots of gore, that actually has very little, and vice versa. And it's nice when they can actually search and get that particular one. Or if yours is a comic book element, then you can select the option that says comic book or coming of age or conspiracy. So the key is to just review all of the various elements that are here so that you can then fit, so that the person who is looking for what you have is able to find you.
Okay.
But there aren't special tricks. We try and keep the playing field even. We don't operate off meta tags where, you put in 1,000 different items and, what I mean? We don't do that.
Right.
You honestly go in there and you select what your, does it have a mythical character? Is it in the cold? Is the main character overcoming some kind of obstacle? Is there a twist at the end? Is there a caper heist, a birthday movie, a buddy, biblical, art house, apocalyptic, UFO, tragedy, terrorist, whatever it is, you select those so that, because producers often, very often can get very specific as to what they're looking for. Sometimes they're not, but sometimes they are. They could have just spoken to, Steven Spielberg the other day, and Steven said, I would just really love to do a wedding comedy that's kind of quirky and that involves nanotechnology and it's paranormal. Well, then that producer is going to look for those elements and hope to find what they're looking for.
I hope Spielberg's not looking for that. I don't want to see that one Spielberg movie.
Yeah, I hear you.
But what would you say are like the genres that are, I mean, maybe not the hot sellers, but what do you see most people buying up?
Kind of in order, I would say, is thrillers, horrors, comedies, dramas. Basically, those are the more common ones. And then right below that would be the indie art house. Mm-hmm. Right about in that order. And that, it fluctuates every now and then, for a few weeks you'll have everybody looking for comedy. But the mainstay is pretty much thriller, horror, comedy, drama, indie.
Have any screenwriters that you guys have had on there, have they done anything that did they do anything innovative to market themselves that kind of impressed you, or have you seen any screenwriter actually doing things like, for example, creating publicity for their screenplay before they ever sell it?
Well, I think if a writer can do that, that would be extremely smart of them to do so. What the writers that I've seen do, that's... You really want to know what the unique thing is that the writers who are successful do?
Definitely.
that separates them from the writers who aren't? The writers who are successful are consistent. They are consistently working on promoting their materials. Week in and week out, they're making calls here, they're sending emails there, they're sending out query letters here, they're going to mixers, they're attending screenings, they're going to film festivals, they're routinely, consistently marketing themselves. And that really is what separates them. That is, because there's so many different ways you can do it, and you find something that happens, and it's kind of like, oh, well, that was really lucky for that person. But the bottom line is he would type 10, 20, 30, 40 different things, and then all of a sudden that one lucky thing happened out of the other 20 really unusual things he did. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So the ones who are actually making it that I've seen are the ones who are consistent. Come hell or high water, they're going to do something about getting their scripts out there on a routine, consistent basis. Those are the ones who are successful.
Now, talking about the marketing yourself as a writer, are there ways that people who aren't actually in Los Angeles can market themselves and do, network and things like that online that you've seen? Absolutely.
Again, that would be something where, off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything. But even writers groups is a good place to start. But I would not end there. I would start there if you haven't done anything, just to get your feet wet, and then continue and do a lot more after having gotten your feet wet. On our website, at InkTip.com, you go to resources and you select the articles menu item, and there are tons and tons of different ways that you can market yourself. You don't have to be in Los Angeles. There's ways on the internet. There's ways through IMDb. There is no shortage of different ways that one can market oneself.
Okay. Now, you started in 2000 with InkTip, even though it had a different name, right?
Yeah, it was called Writers Script Network.
Okay. How has the industry changed since you started?
The primary difference, I would say, is that the internet is now so much more accepted than it was before. You can send scripts on, via email. You can electronically sign release forms. Producers can go to websites like mine to find writers and scripts. When I first started, there probably weren't even more than 150 producers who looked at the internet as a possible resource for writers and scripts. And now all of them look at it as a resource. Most production companies have websites where you can make contact with them in one way or another. So it is completely changed in terms of accessibility. Completely, it is so much more easy to make contact with a producer than it was before.
Now, do you think all the changing technology and the fact that it costs ridiculously, much cheaper now than it used to cost, back in even 2007, with HD cameras and all the equipment that's out there, has that changed the way that producers work and the way that screenplays are looked at?
I don't know. I don't know because it's not something that, because our basic rule is if producers looking, we help them find it. And we're not involved in negotiations, and we're not producers ourselves. So in terms of what the mentality is or the point of view of the producer who was producing in 2000 and compared to what it is now, I really don't know what the mentality is. I do know that providing a writer does have a completed polished screenplay that is at least somewhat marketable, he has a greater chance, providing he actually realizes that he's got two hats, one that of a business owner selling his client's scripts, and that of the writer himself. With those cautions being in mind, he or she has a much greater potential of getting the movie made than they did 20 years ago, without a doubt.
Do you find that most of the people who are making these films, do you hear about them going to AFM and having success there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you keep track of the films, and do you see, for example, the AFM just passed through Los Angeles? Do you see films that have been produced through you guys, or not produced through, but screenplays going to AFM and having success there?
I don't know the exact statistics on it.
Okay.
But I would say that anywhere where there are producers, there should be writers selling their scripts. So
yeah.
if you have access to AFM and you're a screenwriter, then by all means you should be there.
Right.
And AFM is a really good organization, so they've got real producers there. So I would definitely recommend any writer who is able to attend it. Likewise, writers should always be going to as many screenings and mixers and festivals as they can possibly go to, because festivals are a great way to meet producers, up-and-coming producers, perhaps a new co-writer, and even actors. So, yes.
Okay. So, yes. I wanted to talk for a second about Nowhere Girl. Can you talk about that for a second and where that project came from?
Sure. I produced a documentary, a political documentary, a number of years ago from a writer that I found on InkTip. And it was a very low-budget thing. I was financing myself, so, it was really, really tight. And the writer was just there for me. The writer, director, Jed Rigney, he was just there. He says, Jerrol, I understand, no problem, I'll get it done. It was, and I really couldn't pay him that much. In all honesty, I just couldn't do it. And so, he writes another screenplay called Nowhere Girl, and he wants to get it made, and he gives me a call, and he says, Jerrol, I'd like your help with this. Well, I owe him. So basically, I contacted various friends of mine, and those various friends decided that they would invest in that movie for him, and that's how the movie got made. So sometimes, you're working with a producer who, you're getting that movie made you're practically getting paid nothing. But if the producer has any decency or honesty at all, he's going to consider he owes you, just like I owed Jed Rigney. And so when he came up with that screenplay, I didn't even read it. I owed him. So, I contacted my friends and helped them raise the financing for it.
Mm-hmm. So you're working as executive producer on it, or you're? Well,
that's what executive producers do. They're involved more in the money line. They're not. They're not actual. They're not typically. Putting the whole deal together. They're putting some kind of element generally related to financing. So, and that's what I did. So he gave me executive producer credit.
Oh, that's great.
And the fact is that without me having initiated and gotten the first investors into the movie, he would have never gotten the rest of the financing, and the movie would have never gotten made.
Right.
So that's why I got executive producer credit, because I got the ball rolling for him.
Now, has that already been shot? Is that is the
It's
film?
fully made. It's fully made, and it's just recently won Best Audience Award at a festival. Let's see, I don't remember which one it was, but it just won Best Audience Award. It's now got a sales rep, and the sales rep is going all out in selling it to the various territories.
That's great.
So I think it's actually going to do pretty well.
Now, going back to InkTip, I just have a couple more questions, and I'll take you off the hook here. Now, you had mentioned something about some improvements that you wanted to make to InkTip over the years. You had mentioned a tracking feature. Is that something you've developed so that when screenwriters submit a screenplay, they can actually see kind of where it's going, or if it's been read, or things like that?
Oh, we've always had that tracking feature there, and that is
okay.
one of the things that has to do with transparency. You know, the thing is a writer's is gonna rely on you to help them get their script in the right hands, and to not let them know who's actually viewing their works. To me, it's not safe for the writer. It's not secure. And to me, it leaves the door open to dishonesty. It's you know, you can make a brag and how great you are and all that kind of stuff, but let's see who's actually looking at at your scripts. You know, a writer should know, in order to protect himself, that writer should know who's actually looking at that script. And so we track that. So when a writer lists a script on our website, how many times their logline has come up in the search, how many times a producer or development exec or agent has downloaded their resume or their synopsis or their script or whatever, it's all there for the writer to see. So that they know where their work has been. How can you keep your property secure and make every best effort to make sure your script's not stolen if you don't even know who's looking at your works? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Plus, it also helps keep me honest, because, you know, there are some writers who just get lots and lots and lots of people looking at their scripts and synopses and resumes and stuff, and there are some writers that don't. And so writers who aren't getting the kind of exposure that they expect, they can then go, okay, well, I guess for whatever reason, at this time for this script, maybe I better just put up a different script on InkTip, one that's actually going to garner a little more attention. So it actually helps the writer in figuring out what they should be posting. So to me, transparency is extremely important. That's why we list all of our successes, so that they can know what caliber producer is actually, or representative is actually using InkTip, what caliber of movies are being made, you know. So, you know, if you've got the next Star Wars that's going to cost $500 million to make, and it's just too good for InkTip, well, then fine. Now you know in advance before you spent any money. You follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all tracked.
Okay.
All of it.
And okay, this is kind of a vague question, so my apologies in advance. But as somebody who's just starting out in screenwriting and they're spending a lot of their time, do you have any concept of pricing that producers are giving on these? Are there standard prices for screenplays, or is it a percentage of the actual budget of the movie, or how does that typically work?
Wow, that varies so incredibly. You know, say for example, a Canadian producer is buying the script from you. Well, then they're going to pay less for it than, say, a producer who, and let's say they're with the actual Writers Guild in Canada, they're going to pay less than if they're with the Writers Guild here in the U.S. So there's even variation within the guild depending on which country you're in. What I would say to any, so in terms of the price, I think rarely it's going to be beyond 5%. I think that if you're a first-time writer and this is your first screenplay and you make it sell, I would be extremely surprised if you got 5%. I would expect it to be somewhere between 1% and 3%. That's what I would expect it to be for the very first writer's sale. That's more likely what it would be. And sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's even lower than that. So, but the thing is that the writer has to look at this as a career. Or let me finish answering the question and I'll get back to the career thing. So it's going to vary. It's going to vary tremendously, and the first-time writer is not going to get a lot, and that's just all there is to it. Unless somehow they're the exception to the rule, and some agent latches on to them and they sell to the studio and they sell for $2 million. But that, like I say, is that is the anomaly. That is the exception to the rule that hardly ever happens. Did I answer that on the price range? So the other thing is, but typically it'll just be an option. It'll be a $1 option. It'll be $100 option. It'll be a $1,000 option, somewhere in that range. And it's such a small amount, it doesn't really matter whether it's $500,000 or $10. It's in no way going to give you minimum, wage for all the hours you put into the screenplay. But that producer is then going to get your screenplay into many, many more producers, directors, distributors, and so forth, if they're really trying to produce it. So that is well worth the fact that you only got paid $10, $100, or $1,000 or whatever for the option. And what I was saying before is about the careers, is you got to look at this as a career. You don't expect to be the CEO of Starbucks fresh out of college. It happens. You do have people who don't even graduate college. They start their own business, but they're the exception to the rule. Normally, you're going to become the CEO of some, billion-dollar company. Very likely, you're going to be going to college, and one of the things you're going to be doing is you're going to be an intern, and you're going to work for free for a number of months. And then you're going to start out, like in the major agencies, in the mailroom, and you're going to work your way up. Well, writers, actors, directors, producers, they all work the same way. They work their way up. Producers find that great script and give it to another producer, and the movie gets made, and they sometimes don't even get credit. So so you have to look at it as a career and know that you as a writer are capable of writing many, many, many more brilliant screenplays that can get made. And so this is just a stepping stone. Get your movie made. Get that option. Get your script out there. And then as time goes by and your reputability and your relationships strengthen, then you'll be able to demand more and more and more money.
Okay, my final question
Sure.
is you started your company as because you said that you had a hard time selling a screenplay that you had written.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Now, do you have any plans in the future of trying to write another screenplay and trying to produce a film on your own or anything like that?
I have zero intention of writing a screenplay. Because I see so many writers out there who have the gift with prose. And they're able to write things, and I just read it and go, wow, I wish I could have written it that eloquently. No, I am not a writer. So no, I have no intention of doing that. As far as producing goes, well, I was involved in Nowhere Girl because I owed, that writer who helped me so much on my documentary. Who knows what the future holds? It's certainly not something I'm even remotely looking at right now, but I don't know 10 years from now what I'm going to be doing. I may want to get back into it and get excited about it all over again. Who knows?
You never know. Well, Jerrol, thank you so much for sitting down and talk with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure this will help a lot of people to, see the amazing benefits of, joining somewhere like InkTip. Thanks a lot, and
thank you.
I appreciate it.
I as well, and I hope I hope there's some little tidbits in there that writers and producers like, or people in the industry find useful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.